Gotham City did not die of its wounds. It died of the treatment. Medicine has a word for this: iatrogenesis, illness caused by the healer, disease born of the cure. The unsterilized scalpel, the prescription that breeds a deadlier infection. Applied to a city, the concept turns colder still. Gotham was sick long before Batman. But it was a sickness everyone understood, chronic, manageable, familiar. Then the cure arrived wearing a cape and cowl, and the patient began dying of something new. Something that had never existed before the cure itself. Before the Bat, Gotham belonged to men. Carmine Falcone, Sal Maroni, mobsters with ledgers and appetites, whose crimes were written in the oldest, most legible language on Earth: greed. Frank Miller's Batman, Year 1, 1987, shows that city with surgical honesty, a police department on the mob payroll, judges bought wholesale, graft as civic architecture. The corruption was total, yes, but it was human, comprehensible. A city can negotiate with greed. It can even survive it. Falcone did not want to poison Gotham's reservoir to prove a philosophical point. He wanted his cut. Crime in those days had a face you could recognize and a motive you could name. Murder was business. Extortion was business. Even cruelty was business. And business, by its nature, has limits. What came next had none. It began the way infections begin, with a wound that refused to close. A boy knelt in an alley beside two bodies, and the grief never passed through him the way grief is supposed to pass. It calcified. It learned to perform. Decades of telling this story have trained us to see the pearls falling in slow motion as the origin of a hero. Look at it without sentiment, and it is something else entirely. The origin of a compulsion dressed as a mission. The boy did not grow up to fix what was broken in Gotham. He grew up to stage what was broken in himself, in front of the whole city, every night, forever. And the staging is the point. When the vigilante finally stepped out of the shadows, he did not come as a cop, or a soldier, or anything Gotham had a category for. He came as theater, a silhouette with pointed ears, smoke, superstition. Scott Snyder's Batman, 0 Year, 2013, understands exactly what that debut unleashed. Batman's first appearance does not restore order to the city. It detonates the old one. The moment a costumed war is declared on Gotham's underworld, the power structure cracks open, and into that vacuum crawls a new species of criminal. The Riddler, brilliant, theatrical, starving to be seen, reads the Bat as an invitation and turns Gotham's lights out. Not to rob the city, to solve it, to play with it. The message arrives on the war's very first night, written in riddles. If justice is now a performance, then crime will be one too. This is the escalation no one ordered and no one can cancel. A man in a Bat costume does not deter crime. He additions it. Every gesture of theater demands a costumed answer. And greed never needed answering. Madness does. Gotham's criminals have been men with prices. Now, they began evolving into monsters without them, selected night by night for exactly the kind of derangement that survives a war against a symbol. The cure had chosen its disease, and the disease was learning the cure's face. To understand why the cure took this shape, you have to go down out of the streets and into the skull that designed it. Freud gave a name to what an untreated wound does, the repetition compulsion. And beyond the pleasure principle, he observed that trauma does not remember, it repeats. The psyche returns to the scene of its injury again and again, not to heal it, but to master it. And each repetition is staged as though it were the first night. That is what Bruce Wayne built in the cave under his father's house. Not a war on crime. A repetition machine. Gotham is the alley, the gun goes off every night, and the boy who could not stop it has written himself the one role in the reenactment the child never got to play, the one who arrives in time. Alfred Adler would recognize the architecture at once. The orphan's inferiority, small and frightened and rich beyond power, overcompensated into a private will to dominance, so total it requires a costume, a mythology, a stage the size of a city. But it is Jung who cuts closest because Jung knew the shadow is not defeated, it is worn. In Frank Miller's Batman, Year 1, 1987, the moment of choosing arrives not as strategy, but as confession. A bleeding, uncertain man sits in his study and asks what shape terror should take, and the answer comes crashing through the window. Abba, the thing that frightened him as a child. He does not choose a symbol to frighten criminals. He chooses the thing that frightened him, puts it on, and calls the inversion medicine. I shall become a bat, and the patient becomes the illness by prescription. This is the founding act of Gotham's iatrogenesis, because the cure is selected for the patient's psychology, not the city's disease. Miller's Gotham still has a disease daylight could treat. Racketeering, judges on payroll, the Falco machine, crimes with prices, with reasons, with terms. Gordon, the city's one honest organ, works by method. But a man performing his trauma cannot fight greed. Greed offers no spectacle, no mirror, no worthy audience. And here the narcissism of the vigilante enters the record. Not the vanity of the mask, but something clinical. The subconscious need for an enemy theatrical enough to validate the wound. A mugger in an alley is too small a container for that much grief. Only a monster can justify the bat. So the unmetabolized trauma begins, quietly, auditioning adversaries proportionate to its staging, and Nietzsche's warning lands over every rooftop in the city like a verdict. And if you gaze long into an abyss, the abyss also gazes into you. Bruce Wayne stared into the hole where his parents used to be, and the hole stared back and handed him a costume. Grant Morrison understood where that exchange ends. In Arkham Asylum, A Serious House on Serious Earth, 1989, the rogues are not Batman's opposites. They are his interior. The Joker as the wound that laughs, Two-Face as the will divided, every inmate a fragment of the shadow he refuses to integrate, walking around outside him in bodies. The asylum is a hall of mirrors, and the man who storms it to restore mastery is shown, room by room, that he has been living inside it all along. The escalation theory completes its psychology in Jeff Loeb's The Long Halloween, 1996, the chronicle of the year the mob died and the monsters were born, one by one, in costume, born not despite the bat but around him. The abyss has finished studying its student. Now it starts to teach, and the first lesson is natural selection. Before the bat, Gotham's underworld ran on a Roman model, and Carmine Falcone wore the title like a crown. Dynasty, territory, tribute, patience. His empire, and Sal Maroni's rival operation beside it, functioned the way governments function. Crimes with prices, terms, and heirs. A man who kills for money can be predicted, because money is a language everyone speaks. He can be bought, turned, prosecuted, and, crucially, he ages. The Falcone machine was a disease, but a disease daylight could treat. Judges could be exposed, ledgers opened, sons refusing the inheritance. That is the Gotham Frank Miller leaves at the end of Batman. Year 1, 1987. Corrupt to the marrow, but humanly corrupt, its pathology legible. Then Batman introduces a new currency into that economy. Spectacle. He cannot be bought, because he wants nothing money sells. He cannot be threatened, because he already died once as a boy in an alley. Against such an enemy, the mob's old arithmetic fails, and the escalation theory stops being metaphor and becomes ecology. The bat is a selection pressure. The ordinary crook, the burglar, the leg breaker, the man in it for the take, is culled or retires. What survives is what fear cannot touch, and what fear cannot touch is the obsessive, the performer, the mad. Under Falcone, crime was something men did. Under the bat, it becomes something men are, an identity put on like a costume, because a costume is the only camouflage that works against a predator shaped like a bat. Escalation does not attract madness. It breeds for it, the way an antibiotic breeds resistant strains. Iatrogenesis in its purest clinical form. The treatment manufacturing the superbug. The theater demands a cast, and the city, obedient as any audience, supplies one. Jeff Loeb and Tim Sale's The Long Halloween, 1996 to 1997, is that breeding recorded as history. Across 13 issues, we watch Falcone try to manage a new problem. A killer called Holiday, who murders on every holiday, and every instrument of mob management fails in turn. Falcone suspects the freaks, and he is right to suspect, but wrong about where they come from. The killing is not imported into his world, it is born inside it. The holiday killer is Alberto Falcone, the Romans' own son, the empire's heir, learning the bat's grammar and applying it to his father's ledger. Holiday's murders are not transactions. They're performances staged on the calendar, killings laden with ritual meaning. That is not the syntax of greed. That is the syntax Batman brought to Gotham, and the healer's disease has reached the bloodline. The mob did not lose a war. It caught an infection. By the year's end, Maroni's last act of mob-style muscle, throwing acid on Harvey Dent in open court. Manufacturer's Two-Face, the old world spending its final coin to mint the new one. Gotham's White Knight, its legal cure, walks out of that courtroom a costumed monster. The harm of the healer is now complete at every level. The patient, the prosecutor, and the poison indistinguishable. Miller saw the ending from the beginning. The final page of Year One announces a criminal who calls himself the Joker, summoned to the stage by a spotlight shaped like a bat. What follows is adaptive radiation, each rogue a counter-adaptation to the Cape's theater. The Riddler answering it with proof, Scarecrow weaponizing the Bat's own fear against him, the Joker escalating performance beyond all control. Their madness is not breakdown. It is fitness selected for, perfectly shaped to the predator that made it survivable. Gotham had no monsters before Batman. It had them after him, because after him, monsters were the only things that could survive. The infection now turns inward. Having bred the monsters, Batman's war requires them, not as a failure of justice, but as a condition of his own existence. Consider the rule he proclaims loudest: he will not kill. Gasem hirsa moral absolut. But the no-kill code is not mercy. It is a preservation order. In Frank Miller's The Dark Knight Returns, 1986, the Joker sits catatonic in Arkham for a decade, silent, inert, a husk in a cell, and wakes the moment Batman returns to the sky. 10 years. The monster does not hunt, does not scheme, does not even breathe with purpose until his opposite number puts the signal back in the clouds. That is not a villain with a plan. That is an organ waiting for its body. When Batman finally comes to him, the Joker dies laughing, thanking his old friend for the years of fun. Miller understood what the psychiatrists in that book never do. The Joker has no life outside Batman. He is not a disease Batman fails to cure. He is a disease Batman keeps alive, because curing him would mean amputating himself. This is the narcissism of the vigilante made flesh. A wound so large it demands a stage instead of a healing. A boy's parents died in an alley, and instead of grief that could end, he built a cosmology that cannot. Alan Moore saw the symmetry in The Killing Joke, 1988. The Joker's confession that one bad day is all it takes to drive the sanest man alive to lunacy, and his need to prove that thesis on Commissioner Gordon, the one incorruptible man left. That is not madness. That is method. Two orphans of the same bad day, dragging each other through an argument that must never conclude, each needing the other to be right. Moore ends the book with the two of them laughing together in the rain at a joke about two asylum inmates escaping across a flashlight beam. One refuses to cross, certain the other will switch the light off halfway. The joke is them. The beam is the war. Neither can stop, because stopping would mean admitting the beam was never solid. Grant Morrison pressed the diagnosis deeper in Arkham Asylum, a serious house on serious earth. 1989, where Batman walks into the asylum to face his own rogues, and the building recognizes him on arrival. The Joker greets him like family and tells him they're the only two real people in the house, because the madmen know their keeper is their mirror. Every cell is a room in a mansion built from one man's trauma. The bat on the roof and the clowns in the basement share one circulatory system. Iatrogenesis has completed its circle. The healer is now the ecosystem of the disease, and the disease is the healer's reason for being. Then Jason Todd comes home. In Judd Winnick's Under the Red Hood 2005, the boy Batman failed, beaten to death with a crowbar, mourned in a glass case in the cave, returns as a man with a gun, and the one question Batman cannot answer: why is the Joker still alive? Now, why did you fail to save me? Why do you keep him alive year after year, knowing exactly what he will do next, his future murders already written in the names of people who haven't died yet? Jason offers him absolution. Kill him, or I will. And Batman refuses, and the refusal is the confession. He speaks of a line he cannot cross, an edge past which he would never come back. But Jason hears the truth beneath the ethics. The line is not a wall. It is a stage mark. The Joker lives because Batman needs a monster worthy of the theater, and the theater exists because the boy in the alley still needs witnesses. The abyss did not merely gaze back. It moved in, put on a mask, and learned to call him by his father's name. And because the wound never closes, the infection does not stay in a man. It spreads outward into the institutions that were built to protect Gotham, the way a botched treatment colonizes the body it was meant to save. Ed Brubaker in Greg Ruckus' Gotham Central drops the camera to street level, into the Major Crimes Unit, where the war Batman started is inherited by detectives who own no capes and can survive no rooftop falls. Renee Montoya, Crispus Allen, Marcus Driver, they get the residue. Not the clean myth, but the paperwork of madness. Bodies frozen mid-scream, juries rigged with riddles, hostages wired into jokes they were never told. Before the bat, the GCPD was corrupt but legible. A Falcone could be understood, indicted, eventually buried under enough evidence. Now the department cannot even classify what arrests. The courts cannot try the freaks. Blackgate cannot hold them. Arkham keeps losing them. And every detective in the bullpen knows the unspoken arithmetic. The monsters arrive the same week the spotlight hits the clouds. That is the secret the bat signal has always kept. It is not a plea for help. It is a dinner bell, an invitation card slipped under the door of every broken mind in the city. Each time Gordon throws the switch, he is not summoning a protector. He is confirming an appointment, and the appointment is with escalation itself. By outsourcing the law to a man who answers to no one, the city has inherited his enemies as its own. Gotham's courts, its asylum, its press, its mayors have slowly stopped functioning as a government and become stage crew, rigging lights around one man's trauma night after night, because the alternative is admitting the theater has no play. Iatrogenesis has scaled from patient to municipality. The treatment has reorganized the hospital around itself. And now the hospital exists to keep the treatment employed. And the citizens learn because that is what hosts do. In a city where madness is rewarded with fame, where nobody in face paint can hold the skyline hostage and have his riddle debated on the evening news, theater becomes the only upward mobility that works. The rogues were never an invasion from outside. They are Gotham's most successful career path. Each new generation of freaks auditioning for the attention of a man who taught the city that pain, properly costumed, makes you immortal. Here, then, is the verdict Gotham cannot pronounce aloud. Batman did not save the city from its monsters. He taught it to manufacture them. Every cell in Arkham, every beam in the sky, every fresh scar on a detective who never asked for this war is a sentence in a confession he's been writing since the alley. And he will keep writing it, because the confession is the only autobiography he has. Not Gotham's savior, but its pathogen, the tragic architect of his own eternal, unwinnable war, condemned to keep building the enemy that justifies the building. And the war cannot be won, because winning would erase the warrior. So the question was never whether Gotham could be saved. It hangs over the skyline every night, written in light that is really a wound. If the cure dies the day the patient is healed, was it ever medicine at all? Or was it always just the disease, learning to call itself doctor?